Breaking news, a World War II veteran has revealed top secrets from the war, stories that were never meant to be told. What he says next changes everything.
She looked like just a normal girl. That goal caused more damage to the Germans than entire units ever did.
Newly released resistance records and post-war intelligence files reveal how a seemingly ordinary 14-year-old girl became one of the most unexpected and lethal threats to Nazi officers during World War II. Here's how it all happened. A park bench in Haarlem, Netherlands. Early spring, 1943. German boots echo faintly on cobblestone streets, still pretending to be peaceful. A woman sits alone on a bench, gloves folded in her lap, eyes darting whenever a shadow passes. She is not nervous by accident. She is nervous because she carries something far more dangerous than a weapon. A list, names, addresses, entire families. Every Jewish household in the region, carefully written down, ready to be handed to the Gestapo. She does not notice the bicycle at first. It rolls quietly toward her, its tires barely whispering against the stone. A girl rides it, small, thin, her hair braided into neat pigtails. She looks 12, maybe younger. No uniform, no armband, no reason to look twice. The girl stops near the bench. She smiles. "Excuse me," she says softly. "What's your name?" The woman answers. That single word seals her fate. The girl reaches into her coat, not clumsily, not nervously. Her hand is steady. A pistol appears, small, efficient, already aimed. One shot. The woman collapses forward, her list tumbling onto the ground beside her. The girl does not run. She mounts her bicycle, pushes off calmly, and disappears down the street like any other child heading home before dinner. Her name is Freddie Oversteegen. She is 14 years old. And that bicycle, dismissed by German patrols as harmless, has already saved hundreds of lives. This is not a story about luck. It is not a story about impulse. It is a story about preparation, conviction, and the quiet weaponization of innocence. Freddie was born in 1925, just outside Haarlem. Her childhood was not soft. Her family lived on the edge of poverty, drifting between small homes and temporary shelters. Her mother, Treintje Oversteegen, was a committed communist and believed one thing above all else: when injustice appears, neutrality is a crime. Their small apartment became a hiding place. Jewish refugees slept where Freddie and her sister Truus once did. Sometimes strangers filled their beds. Sometimes food ran out. Comfort was sacrificed without discussion. Then came May 10th, 1940. Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands. 5 days later, the Dutch army surrendered. German flags replaced Dutch ones. New rules appeared overnight. Curfews, rations, registries, then disappearances. Doors smashed open with rifle butts. The training did not happen in a camp or a barracks. It happened beneath the earth, an underground potato shed, damp and dark, hidden beneath a farmer's field. There, Freddie and Truus learned how to fire pistols by candlelight, how to control their breathing, how to aim without shaking, how to pull a trigger and accept what followed. No speeches, no ideology lessons, only results. Their first missions were not assassinations, they were distractions. German warehouses were guarded by SS soldiers who never suspected girls laughing on bicycles. Freddie and Truus would approach checkpoints, flirt awkwardly, ask questions, giggle at jokes they didn't understand. While guards focused on them, resistance fighters slipped behind fences and lit fires. By the time alarms sounded, the girls were already gone. The warehouses burned. Van der Wiel understood something important. These girls could go where men could not. Youth was their camouflage. Their innocence was a weapon. Soon, missions escalated. Collaborators came first. Dutch citizens who worked for the Nazis. Men and women who sold out neighbors for money, power, or survival. People who compiled lists, like the woman on the park bench. Freddie's first assassination stayed with her forever. She described the moment afterward in simple terms: the instinct to help, to kneel down, to undo what had just been done. That instinct never disappeared. but neither did her resolve. As months passed, Freddie and Truce refined their methods. Sometimes they worked alone, sometimes together. The forest became a favored place. One sister would enter a bar frequented by German officers. She'd choose a target, laugh at his stories, let him believe he had won something rare: affection. Then she'd ask the question that never failed. "Would you like to go for a walk?" Deep in the woods, the second sister waited. One shot. The officer would vanish, absorbed by a war that already swallowed thousands daily. Other times, speed mattered. Truce pedaled. Freddie sat behind her. They'd identify a target walking down a street, ride past casually, and Freddie would fire without stopping. 2 girls on a bicycle, nothing to report, nothing to chase. The Germans never learned. By 1943, they were no longer just couriers or saboteurs. By 1943, the war had changed shape. German patrols still marched through Harlem, but their confidence had begun to crack. Allied bombers crossed the skies more often. Trains vanished from schedules. Officers disappeared on roads they had walked 100 times before. The resistance felt it too. Operations became bolder, orders became sharper, and the moral weight of each mission grew heavier. Freddie Oversteegen was no longer the girl with the bicycle. Within underground circles, she was known as reliable, precise, silent. She knew every alley, every hedgeline, every escape route within miles. She planned exits before she planned shots. But even in a war that demanded killing, there were still lines, and one order forced them to decide where they stood. Late in 1943, resistance leadership received intelligence that shook even hardened operatives. Arthur Seyss-Inquart, the Reich Commissioner of the Netherlands, one of the most powerful Nazi figures in occupied Europe, was tightening reprisals. Arrests increased. Executions followed. Resistance members were vanishing into prisons and camps. The proposal that came next was brutal in its simplicity. Kidnap his children. Use them as leverage. If Seyss-Inquart refused to release resistance prisoners, the children would be killed. The order reached Freddie, her sister Truce, and Hannie Schaff together. There was no debate, no hesitation. They refused. Freddie said it quietly, but firmly. "We are not like them." Truce agreed. Hannie agreed. They had assassinated collaborators. They had killed German officers. They had sabotaged rail lines knowing civilians might suffer shortages. But children were not targets. Ever. That refusal nearly cost them their place in the resistance. But it also defined them. The difference between resistance and terror was not who you killed. It was who you refused to kill. As the war dragged on, the violence did not become easier. It became heavier. One afternoon in Harlem, 1944 arrived like a storm over the Netherlands. Allied forces were closing in, but the occupation had tightened its grip. Harlem's streets were full of checkpoints. German patrols no longer marched lazily. They moved like predators, their eyes trained for the faintest sign of resistance. Rumors circulated. Executions were happening faster than arrests. Families of known operatives disappeared into the night, sometimes never to return. For Freddie Oversteegen and Truus, life had become a relentless balance of survival and mission. Their bicycles, once symbols of speed and freedom, now carried messages, weapons, and sometimes the weight of lives they were determined to protect. Each pedal stroke could mean life or death, not just for them, but for the innocents they were sworn to save. By early spring, the resistance network had received intelligence about a Dutch collaborator, William Raguth, whose betrayal had cost dozens of lives. The assignment was clear: neutralize the threat before he could inform the Germans of further resistance activity. Freddie and Truce, now seasoned operatives at 16 and 18 respectively, prepared meticulously. But the mission was unlike any they had undertaken before. This time, the danger wasn't only from the enemy. It was the chaos that unfolded unpredictably. On the night of March 21, 1944, the sisters and their unit positioned themselves along the canal, where Raguth was rumored to travel home. Shadows flickered against the cobblestone walls as the moon reflected faintly on the water. Hannie Shaft, still in hiding, coordinated remotely, ensuring escape routes were clear. Every step was calculated, every sound analyzed. The world had shrunk to whispers, the smell of wet earth, and the distant clatter of German boots. When Raguth appeared, the operation commenced. Freddie approached on her bicycle, calm and deliberate. Truce followed, keeping cover. The plan was swift, surgical, but something went wrong. Raguth, aware or simply lucky, drew a pistol. In the ensuing confusion, a fellow operative, Jan Bonekamp, was shot in the stomach. The chaos shifted the mission from a controlled strike to a frantic survival scenario. Freddie's heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She fired, neutralizing Raguth, while Truce shielded their wounded comrade. Bonekamp's injury was critical. As Hannie had warned them in previous missions, every second mattered. The sisters dragged him to a canal-side safe house, improvising first aid as best they could. The risk was immense. German patrols were closer than ever, their shouts echoing down the narrow streets. But surrender was not an option. Not now, not ever. April 1945. The war in Europe was entering its final chaotic weeks. The Allied advance had picked up speed. Liberation loomed over Dutch towns like a fragile sunrise. Yet in Haarlem, the streets were still dangerous. German soldiers, desperate and ruthless, had intensified their patrols, checkpoints, and random arrests. The city felt like a pressure cooker, ready to explode at any misstep. Freddie Overstegen and Truce, now 18 and 20, were no longer merely teenage girls with bicycles. They were seasoned operatives, shadows of precision and stealth. Every mission they undertook was informed by months of experience, loss, and survival. Yet even with skill honed through necessity, April 17th would test them in ways no prior operation had. A tip had come in. Gestapo forces were moving through the Overstegen neighborhood, seeking a young resistance operative with red hair. The intel suggested that Hannie Shaft, who had been hiding, was at risk. Freddie and Truce knew the time for subtlety was over. They mounted their bicycles at dusk, the familiar creak of wheels on cobblestones masking the tension in their hearts. The streets were eerily quiet. Even German patrols seemed nervous, aware that the resistance had become unpredictable. Freddie kept her eyes sharp, her senses attuned to every sound. The whisper of wind, the faint clatter of boots, the distant slam of a shuttered window. Truce followed closely, scanning every alley. Their code was simple. Stay together, strike only when necessary, survive to save others. They reached Hannie's location, a small hidden room in the attic of a building facing the canal. She emerged cautiously, pale and tense, her disguise impeccable. The sisters quickly guided her to the nearest safe route, a narrow alley that led to the outskirts of town. Every step was perilous. A single sighting by the wrong person could mean execution. But they moved like ghosts, silent and determined. As they reached the final stretch, tragedy struck. Dutch collaborators, working with the Nazis, had been tipped off. A confrontation erupted in the narrow alleyway. Pistols flashed, shots rang out. Hannie was struck in the shoulder, blood seeping through her clothes. Freddie and Truce fought back instinctively, their small frames concealing the lethal precision they had honed over months. They neutralized the collaborators, but the chaos had drawn attention. Sirens screamed in the distance. German reinforcements were approaching. The sisters, knowing they could not stay, pedaled with all their might, Hannie clinging to Freddie's back while Truce cleared the path ahead. The canals flashed past, the water reflecting the last light of day. Every pedal stroke was a heartbeat, every breath a gamble with